1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Blood Red podcast. I'm Keifer MacDonald, stepping in as your host today. Today I'm joined by Theo Squires. Theo, how are we?
Yeah, I'm all right. You had a trip?
Another one, yes, indeed. Yeah. Hi, Ian, if you're watching. I'm joined by poor Gorst as well. Gorsty, how's things surviving the international break?
Good, yeah. I've been off for a week or so, come back in. A little bit of a barren wasteland, isn't it? The sort of midway point of the international break. So we're just trying to get to Thursday when all the news starts happening again. So Southampton at the weekend, and it's a long old schlep.
Straight back into it. Mm-hmm. And as Gorsty says, we are in the international break, so please do send questions into the YouTube live chat to help us out. Theo and Gorsty will be on hand throughout to answer the questions, no matter how difficult or awkward they are. Before we get into today's episode, shout out to our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link will give you 4 months off the 2-year plan and no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link can be found in the podcast episode description box. God, that really is a mouthful. Gorsty, we'll get straight into it then. International break, sometimes, or most of the time actually, not a very enjoyable experience, especially when Liverpool flying so high at the top of the Premier League, top of the Champions League. But this one's actually been it's had quite a few positives for Liverpool. A few names to pick out. Curtis Jones has done really well in international duty. Caoimhin Kelleher as well, and even young Ben Doak. I mean, as I say, plenty of positives across the club for Liverpool to take, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess so. And we've had the news today as well. I mean, Virgil van Dijk is returning to Liverpool. He's not going to play for Holland against Bosnia on Tuesday night, which is obviously a plus point. Put that in with Mo Salah not playing for Egypt as well, and Trent Alexander-Arnold resting up after that hamstring stretch/strain. And I think it's probably a positive international break so far for Liverpool, isn't it? You know, midway through it. Ben Doak was obviously the big winner. He was earning rave reviews against Croatia for his performance. Didn't see it, I've only sort of seen the Twitter clips where they gave Guardiola a right old time of it, didn't he, on that right wing. Jones took his goal really well against Greece. A lovely little flick finish. Again, another performance yesterday as England ran riot, really, didn't he, in the second half. Kelleher, less so at Wembley yesterday, but obviously with the penalty save, wasn't it? And did he save a rebound as well from it?
Yeah.
For Ireland. So, yeah, all things considered, relatively positive international break. And obviously, Darwin Núñez was involved in a bit of a crazy game, wasn't he? By the looks of it, I think they conceded, was it?
And then Ugarte scored the winner, didn't he?
Yeah, and then they scored in the 11th minute.
Big VAR review in that one.
Yeah, so, so far, so good. Touch wood. Few injuries to report back on. And, we'll see later on this week, won't we, when the players start coming back. And that's always the big day, I guess, when they come back in, maybe Thursday, and get assessed and see where they're up to, and then Arne Slot will be able to update us accordingly on Friday.
Absolutely, and Theo, I just want to touch on Curtis Jones because it's been a good 12 months for him. I think since last summer, certainly he's made sizable steps. He's had a few kind of difficult hurdles to overcome during that time. I mean, he started last season really well, then gets sent off at Tottenham, loses his momentum, comes back in the new year again, starts playing really well, then gets injured at Brentford, misses the League Cup final, and kind of comes back at the back end of last season and kind of hasn't got that same rhythm. This season again, he's kind of has to be patient and bide his time. But we've seen since the last international break, really, he's really taken that chance, and I think that felt really big for him, that debut the other night for England, certainly for himself and that achievement, but also to kind of get the wider recognition of, not that he needs it, but it felt like that was the first time people outside of the Liverpool sphere really kind of stood up and took notice of Curtis Jones. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to an extent. I'd imagine outside the Liverpool circles, there will have been a fair number that will look at Curtis Jones and think, he's just one of the players like Jurgen Klopp liked, kept under his arm, looked after him well, but he's only ever going to be like a squad player. Liverpool keep him around because he's Scouse, because he's homegrown. But obviously, we've all seen him since the academy days. We know the talent he's got. We know when he gets a run of games, he shows that talent. It's just keeping him free of injuries so he can build that rhythm, get that consistency. And he is showing it again, and this is probably his longest run for club and country for a good while. Like we've seen bits back into 22, 23. That's the one that stood out. Like you think he gets that brace at Leicester City, wasn't it? And he was like really stepping up in that Liverpool first team. You think Liverpool spent so much on that midfield revamp, not this summer, last summer, and it was like, where does Curtis Jones fit into this? Well, now we're seeing he's still going to be a starter for them. He's playing so well at the moment, and he can do it in a number of roles. Like for Arne Slot, he's been more of the number 10, hasn't he, the last few weeks? But with England, he's been in that deep role. He's doing really well alongside Conor Gallagher. And he just looks a player who's enjoying his football. He's confident, he's got a smile on his face, and he's really come on leaps and bounds. We've said earlier on in his career, he just needs that consistency. He needs to be free of injury, but he was still young. Players, obviously, they burst onto the scene, and then they have a little bit of a drop-off. It's normal. Then you get to this stage in your 20s, you've got that experience, you've got 100-plus games under your belt. Now go and make it count, and that's what we're seeing now. It's only been a few weeks ago, Arne Slot was saying he needs to do it more consistently. We're already seeing signs of that.
Absolutely. I mean, Gorst, he's a player who's 23 years old. He's, as Theo says, got over 100 appearances for Liverpool, and it's certainly not been a bad Liverpool team that he's been competing to get into. Probably one of the most successful eras in the club's history. I mean, he would have been disappointed with how the summer went. He was obviously included in that provisional squad for the Euros. But then if you kind of look at the players that he was maybe competing against, you think Kobe Mainoo and Adam Wharton, two players who this time last year hadn't played in the Premier League. Jones is obviously on his way to 100 appearances for Liverpool. But he's kind of really bounced back from that, hasn't he? And obviously Lee Carsey's someone who he knows well, and both people who spoke highly of one another. It seems that that's really given him kind of the platform to flourish, hasn't it, on those games. I mean, he was brilliant against Greece in that deeper role, and then last night against Ireland.
Yeah, I agree with Theo. He just needs to get that consistency in his game now, doesn't he? And obviously given a bit of a run to prove that he can do that, because it's never really happened for whatever reason. Klopp tried to change him from a sort of out-and-out attacking midfielder to someone who was much more of a system player in that midfield, and it was always a bit more difficult to tie down what made a player an effective midfielder for Jurgen Klopp as opposed to different managers, because it was such almost like a niche position, wasn't it? It was very much around hard work, covering gaps for fullbacks, releasing forward players quicker than dwelling on the ball and keeping possession and all that sort of stuff. So he's had to adapt his game a lot, and he did that to an extent. He sort of forced his way back into the team, like Theo says, the back end of the season before last, and then up until he gets that sending off at Tottenham, he's in the first team for about 6-7 months really, on and off, because obviously there was a couple of months with summer there, but he just needs a run, for whatever reason it hasn't come, whether it be injuries, suspensions, other players' form, but at the moment he's playing really well on that attacking midfield position. I think he's proven to be a real sort of, not antidote the right way, but a different style to what Szoboszlai brings in that position. And you look at stuff, some of the passes that he can play. You look at the one that he set up Jota for against West Ham on the Cup, the one for Diaz against Leverkusen. It's all about threading those passes in the final third, and I think that's where he really comes into his own. So just like Theo says, he just needs to get that consistency in his game, I think.
I think he's all round, isn't he? Like if you look at the midfielders under Klopp, they all have those attributes that made them them. Like Gini Wijnaldum was great at retaining the ball, Milner was great at winning it back, Fabinho great at winning it back, Henderson's that leader. You can see the passing ability of a Thiago, whereas Jones seems to have a little bit of everything. Like I'm still loving the clip from against Villa, where he turns those three players right on the touchline, but we know he can get forward into the box and score goals. We know he's got a great pass in his vision. We've seen it against Leverkusen as well this season. He's just becoming that all-round midfield package, and considering when he first burst into the team, he wasn't a defensive option, and Klopp, I think, or Pep Linders was saying, it was one of the biggest challenges getting Curtis Jones to be able to defend, and when you can do that, you can do anything. Well, we're seeing it now that he is really taking those next steps into becoming someone who deserves to be one of the first names in that midfield.
Absolutely. I mean, he almost became that replacement in-house for Wijnaldum after he left, and as you say, doing that kind of selfless role, sacrificing maybe those skills and that kind of flamboyant play that caught the eye of so many when he was making his way in the academy and whatnot. But going forward, then, I mean, is he part of your strongest midfield three? Or does it depend? Is it very much horses for courses?
At the moment, yes, but I'd say that with Szoboszlai's probably out of form, McAllister's probably out of form. We know how well Gravenberch is playing. It's very easy for it to go up and down. Like Curtis Jones could pick up an injury, one of those two really comes on, and then we have a completely different conversation. But Liverpool's also got Harvey Elliott coming back. They've got so many good midfielders here, and we're seeing at left back between Gakpo and Diaz as well. You can rotate talented players; they can still have an impact coming off the bench, and it's probably serving those players well, protecting their legs. And when we've seen Curtis Jones have injuries, maybe that will serve him well as well. You are just waiting for Elliott to come back, have some form, and Szoboszlai and McAllister to find their level. But at the moment, he is the first name, along with Gravenberch in that midfield for me.
And Gorst, just to move it on, I mean, Szoboszlai's been a bit of a weird one this season, hasn't he? In terms of, he's not been, firing on all cylinders as maybe he was this time last year. He's probably, I think it'd be fair to say, struggled for most of the calendar year since he picked up that hamstring injury right at the start. But he's kind of reinvented himself in this kind of new role in terms of what he gives Liverpool off the ball. And I think people are realising that's just, especially when you've got Gravenberch and McAllister who are so competent on the ball. Szoboszlai's, what he's doing is running his work rate is kind of equally as important, isn't it, for Liverpool? And
yeah, I'm a bit torn on Szoboszlai, to be honest. I've seen Jamie Carragher arguing a few weeks back that for a £60 million attacking midfielder, you want someone who's going to be a Kevin De Bruyne, a Phil Foden, a sort of real game changer of a player in that position, and I can totally get that point of view. Also, on the flip side, you can also see why Szoboszlai is an important sort of tactical cog, isn't he? The pressing he does from the front, his work rate, his running energy, his energy reserves, all that sort of stuff is really important to what Liverpool are trying to do. Outrun teams, outwork teams. So there are two sides to that argument. I probably sort of side on the idea that for maybe £60 million, you want a little bit more in the final third. But that's not to say he's a poor player by any stretch, but at the moment I think Curtis has probably shown that he can do a little bit more in that position at the moment. But I think that's maybe nitpicking a little bit because there's so many success stories to talk about across Liverpool's season that, you're at risk of sounding, overly biased if we're just talking about the good parts, because it has been that good, 15 wins from 17 games. But yeah, I think at the moment there's not too much to grumble about with Liverpool. So this is where we end up having these sort of minuscule debates over who can bring what to the team, because I think everyone's having a good season, really, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think I was going to say on Diaz, it was only a year ago we were saying he needs to offer more in the final third. So that's how quick it can turn. You just get one goal and then it just explodes. You get that run, you get that form. Szoboszlai is still trying to adjust to that new role, and it hasn't really been consistent in front of him in terms of the centre forward. We know Gakpo and Diaz can rotate, and that's fine. But when you've got Nunes trying to find his feet, Jota, he started well, but then he dropped off, and then he gets the injury. It must be difficult for him. But yeah, it can come, can't it? He's still young. He's just not exploded the way he did when he first started, and you expect him to pick that up. But he's 22, 23? It'll come in time, won't it? You'd imagine.
I suppose a lot of that is kind of that debate is maybe bred from. You can almost get away with it because Liverpool have been so strong defensively. There isn't an absolute need to go and blow teams away as maybe there was in the Jurgen Klopp era. I mean, Konate and Van Dijk. As you say, Van Dijk has obviously returned to Liverpool early this week after kind of been done with it, internationals with Holland. But I mean, those two have been imperious, haven't they, this season? And kind of everything Liverpool have done well has kind of been bred from them, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what is it? 6 goals conceded in the Premier League, 1 in the Champions League, which was 3 minutes into the AC Milan game, and he played 4 games since and kept clean sheets in all of them, haven't he? So, yeah, really strong. Konate, for me, probably now is in the best run of form that he's ever been in at Liverpool, because he was always rotated with Matip for league games, Premier League games. A bit of a weird sort of rotation policy that the Klopp had for those games. He's picked up a fair few injuries. He's been out of form at times, notably towards the back end of last season. But looking at it now, he's really piecing it all together. And I think a lot of it, or part of it, has helped with Trent becoming more of an orthodox right back this season, rather than the sort of marauding, attacking, almost winger at times, or central midfielder that he played at times as well under Klopp. So having a much more settled system as a back four, as a back five, has helped Konate massively. He's not having to cover as much ground, and also as well having McAllister and Gravenberch in front of him as the sort of shields. It's all sort of working in tandem, isn't it? So he's been brilliant. Van Dijk, his levels haven't dipped. If anything, they've gone up, and what a sort of fearsome partnership that is at the moment.
It offers some reassurance if the worst happens and Van Dijk does go at the end of the contract. Like, it's always been Van Dijk and one of other from 3-4 players. But now Konate's really emerging as a leader. Like, he's another player who's had a good international break. They got Captain France last night, got a really good 3-1 win away at Italy, which means they've got top spot. So they'll be seeded for the Nations League playoffs. But yeah, he's got rave reviews there. They got a clean sheet in the first game. I think it's not easy to lead France. They've always had difficulties, I suppose, with the media or the issues in the camp, and they've got the issues with Mbappe at the moment, whether he should be in or not. So it's not an easy place to be at the moment, but for him to help them get that really important win, he's just building on that form he's had so far for Liverpool this season. And he's probably outshining Van Dijk, if we're being honest. Maybe because he's come from further back and Van Dijk is just doing what Van Dijk does, so you take it for granted a little bit more. It's just normal. But yeah, he's been superb in so many games. He's got the pace, he's got the power, he's winning the challenges, and he's actually got a couple of goals this year as well. He's really come on.
One thing I would say about him getting the France captaincy is it just sort of hammers home how sort of professional and dedicated this Liverpool group is, because you look around the squad and you've got the captain of Japan in Endo, captain of Egypt in Salah, captain of Holland, Van Dijk, captain of Scotland, Robertson obviously, captain of Hungary, Szoboszlai, and now Konate with France. I don't know whether he's got that permanently or whether he's sort of chopping and changing with too many. I'm not sure whether the decision has been made there permanently, but the fact that he's being trialled suggests that this is a player who is serious about his work, you know, his preparation, his dedication, his professionalism, all this sort of stuff that no doubt he's picked up from his teammates across the last few years. So I think having that many leaders in the group at Liverpool is, you know, sometimes it's things that we don't see, but certainly around the camp it must be massively important.
Absolutely, and I mean, to have someone like Van Dijk, Theo next year to kind of learn your trade, you know, as Konate has done over the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, that is kind of invaluable. Just in terms of Van Dijk, I mean, for you, is he absolutely back to his best of that kind of, you know, you think of 19, 20, 18, 19, is he back to his best, you know, at those levels?
He's not really been tested to the extent for us to find out, has he? I don't think he'll ever be viewed the same way there, just because it's been so long now. For you to get back to a good level after an ACL injury and still be competing for the biggest honours and be captain of Liverpool now, that says a lot. The armband obviously seems to get another level out of him again. He doesn't seem to have been criticised as much by the Dutch media the last couple of international breaks.
Must be doing something right.
So yeah, he must be doing something.
He stopped doing press conferences.
Was he?
Yeah.
I got in a mood with him.
Read a quote from him today that someone asked him why have you stopped doing them, and he said, "Oh, I see you've noticed that." And I think he just sort of said, "You know, I do enough media as it is, and it's time for the other lads to have a little go of it." But yeah, he always sort of fronts up, doesn't he, in his role as the leader of the group.
Yeah, he's just been having another really good season, isn't he? And it probably helps him having that stable partner alongside him. Like, we know how good he can be alongside Joe Gomez, and we saw decent glimpses alongside Kwanzaa. But when you've got a new head coach coming in, you need stability and you need your captain to lead by example, and he's exactly what he's doing. I'm sure we'll have that conversation so many times this season before it gets resolved, but you want him to get that contract sorted as soon as possible, because he's 32, 33, I think. You can get another 2 years out of him easily, can't you? Like, even if at that end of the contract he isn't first choice, first name on the list, he's still a vital squad player. That's very good to have at centre backs. Like we saw it, Jamie Carragher, Sammy Hoopier. It doesn't matter if they're not playing week in, week out towards the end of that contract. They've still got such a vital role to play in the squad. And when Van Dijk is this huge leader, you just want him around the camp for as long as you can keep him.
And Gorst, one of the things I've been most kind of impressed with of Van Dijk over the last 18 months or so has been how he kind of reinvents his game kind of continuously. You know, you think of the centre half he was 6 years ago. He's obviously not that player because of age, but also because of, you know, injuries and whatnot. He still obviously has the speed and he has kind of aerial prowess, but his reading of the game, I think, has shone through more in recent times, because he's not, you know, so reliant. Not reliant, if it's maybe the wrong word, but he almost has to change his game because he's got older and he's maybe not as explosive over short distances as he once was.
Yeah, he's just got absolutely everything, hasn't he, as a centre back that you'd possibly want. And one of the things that's impressed me this season is we always see that trademark sort of raking diagonal, don't we, to Mo Salah, and he's still got that in his lock and he still plays it, but I remember him speaking a few months ago about him being encouraged to sort of fizz balls into midfield a little bit more, and he plays those passes now to Gravenberch, who can drop a shoulder, and then Liverpool really get away and at the back four of the opposition, and noticed that quite a bit in this game this season as well. It's been good to see. There was a couple of times at Manchester United that sort of sticks out in my head, and thought he was really good against Villa, wasn't he? You know, he plays really well at the back, but has a hand in the opening goal as well when he sort of just I don't know why he finds himself in an almost right wing back position, but he's up there, he wins it, plays just a salad, and then they go on and score through Nunes.
I mean, so many defenders would have just hooked that down the line and
not
aimlessly,
even
wouldn't
looked.
they?
Yeah. But he's probably thought, what am I doing here? Let's just get rid of it.
Nosebleed.
Yeah, he's been brilliant, and no shock that Virgil van Dijk is a player in form, but I think it's worth repeating just of how good he's been and how sort of miserly Liverpool have been defensively, because for all the goals that the players are getting, Salah's in great form, Luis Diaz having a great season, could even be his best Liverpool season by the end of it. It's all been built on this back line for me.
Absolutely, and someone who's been kind of really important in this back line over the last 5 or 6 weeks has been Caoimhin Kelleher, as we touched on at the top of the show. Another kind of really strong performance for Ireland for him on Friday night. Obviously didn't go to plan at Wembley against England on Sunday, but it feels like every time he plays for Ireland, the debate about his future kind of comes up, and certainly when someone like Roy Keane is kind of involved on punditry, he kind of instigates that. But I mean, for you, is it a foregone conclusion that he will leave Liverpool at the end of the season? Theo, do you think there's an argument for him to stick around, or do you think maybe...
If you'd read the website over the weekend, you know what I think.
Well, I was actually off over the weekend there, so you can let me off. But with the signings Liverpool have made, and you look at Jaros coming through as well, I think everyone's kind of maybe thinking that they'll both players, Kelleher and the club will maybe part ways at the end of the season. But I mean, is there an argument to maybe say he could propel himself to first choice? I mean, I know Slot said when Alisson comes back, he will kind of assume that role again. But I mean, he's such a talented goalkeeper, isn't he? I mean, he probably is the best number 2 in the world, I think.
Yeah, it's very difficult for Kelleher, isn't it? I think probably since he won the first League Cup, we've been expecting him to leave. Like, you can't be that good a number 2 and be kept as a number 2. You expect someone to come in, put the money down on the table, and then he goes on and becomes the first choice elsewhere. The argument with Liverpool is Alisson has got those injuries. It's worth keeping him around. He will play games. But if Alisson didn't have the injuries, he wouldn't be playing at all. He'd just get the League Cup games. So you've got the best goalkeeper in the world in Alisson Becker. He starts. That's a no-brainer. You will always go with Alisson, and it makes sense that Arne Slot's got that view. There will probably become a point where Liverpool look at that injury record against the wages, Alisson's age, and make a decision to look elsewhere. But that could be why they've signed Mamardashvili. That seems to be the future. During the Euros, he was talking about what he wanted to do, and I don't want to be a number 2. I'm not going to go somewhere to be a number 2. So that's a surprise in itself that he was happy to come to Liverpool. When he said those quotes, he was referring to Bayern Munich. But Manuel Neuer is that much older. That seems more of a pathway to be a number 1 at an elite European club. But it means it's going to be a big decision for Liverpool what they want to do with these goalkeepers. And Kelleher's been so open about he wants to go on, he wants to be a number 1 elsewhere. It just seems unfathomable, but they keep keeping him and no one comes in and puts an offer in. You can't just keep him there when he doesn't want to be. And there's only so many times he's going to be happy to get 10 games a season because Alisson's injured or whatever. And you see this new goalkeeper coming in, that's going to be a knock on his confidence. It's a testament to his abilities that he's not being distracted by it. He can come in the team now and have such a good run of form. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Liverpool's resolution is to this, because there's also a dilemma with Jaros in terms of he's not Adrian, is he? He's not late 30s, mid 30s or whatever, had his career. He is someone at the start of his career, had a good loan spell in Austria. You want him to push on. He's not going to be happy just not even making the bench because he's third choice. So they've got 4 goalkeepers next summer. Who they're looking at there, who's going to be number 1, who's going to be number 2. I don't envy Arne Slot having to make that choice. But then what do the goalkeepers want? Does Alisson, is he tempted by moving on? Kelleher, we know what he wants to do. Do they just loan Mamardashvili out like Chelsea used to do for Courtois? I suppose it will become clear in a few months' time. But it's a very interesting one to keep an eye on.
And Gorst, maybe feel sorry is the wrong word, but do you have a bit of sympathy for Kelleher? Because it seems that, he, no matter how good he performs, he knows that he'll never get that number 1 shirt, and that's just kind of the reality of, being at a club like Liverpool where, you have the world's best in those positions.
Yeah, I remember him speaking on international duty in June, and he was quite coy, but he sort of give off the impression he was a player who was waiting for offers to arrive and sort of thought that this might be his final few weeks at Liverpool. And then he stays, doesn't he? The transfer window closes and he remains as a Liverpool player. And then that's when the other sort of was he on Ireland duty again, where he was a bit more forthright?
That's September, I think it was, wasn't it?
Maybe, in terms of basically saying essentially he wanted to leave and got told no, didn't he? So he said it wasn't always my decision, and I think he's been keen to remain respectful. Don't think there's been massive rucks behind the scenes, but definitely come across like he was a player who thought his time was at its end and he was ready to move on, and it didn't happen because Liverpool have decided that no, we're going to need you at some stage of the season, and lo and behold, it's come to pass, hasn't it? With Alisson's hamstring injury, which was early October now, it's been what, six weeks or so now. He's still out injured. We'll see if he's back in for Southampton or not, but if not, it's no big emergency or drama. Is it? Kelleher will just carry on keeping goal, and that's why Liverpool were so determined to keep him. Now, what happens next summer is a different kettle of fish. I think Alisson will stay. He sounded very upbeat and positive in the interviews he gave a few weeks back. Doyle was part of that, and he was talking about maybe staying on beyond his current contract. Mamardashvili's obviously going to come in, isn't he? So I think Kelleher, he will only have a year left on his contract at that point. That will be the time for the club to say goodbye and try and get as much as they can for him. So I think partner of the ways is inevitable, but you can see why Liverpool were determined to keep hold of him this season, because he's proven to be massively important for them, really. The last, certainly that run of games, what was it, 6 or 7 games, and he's come in and Liverpool have, won 6 and drew one of them.
Absolutely, and we're halfway through that run now, which, those 12 games from the start of after the last international break, from Chelsea all the way up until Everton, I think everyone was kind of saying was going to be a season defining, 10 or so weeks for Liverpool. I mean, 7 games in, as you say, Gorsty, 6 wins, 1 draw. How impressed have you been with how Slot's dealt with the run? Because even at the start of the season, when Liverpool kind of flying high, they won at Old Trafford, he kind of made the reference of, we'll kind of see how good we are once we're in the Champions League, once we're competing on kind of multiple fronts, and now he's done that. He's obviously beat Bologna, he's beat Leipzig, and he's Leverkusen as well. So he's clearly now he's kind of dealt with that challenge that he was expecting right from the start of the season.
Yeah, and it's only going to sort of ramp up, isn't it, the next few weeks as well, once we come into late November, early December, right through till New Year, when Liverpool are playing 3 times a week now, aren't they, for the rest of the year, and some big games in there as well. Southampton, obviously on Sunday, long old slep for the team, and then on the back of it, Real Madrid to come in the Champions League, then Man City, on the horizon, Newcastle and Everton. Carabao Cup quarter-final lodged in there somewhere as well. So it's a really important period for Liverpool, just like the October to November slot was. Yeah, I mean, you can see why, maybe not season-defining in terms of if they have another good run, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be champions or they're going to win the Champions League, but if they have a bad run, they can certainly undo a lot of good work. So, yeah, I think they've just got to maintain the levels of consistency, and I think this is where rotation is going to be key for Slot. So hopefully he can get the likes of Jota and Elliott back, and Alisson, and hopefully the Trent injury isn't too bad as well, and he's able to chop and change, because he's going to have to in certain games. And yeah, Liverpool can't really take their eye off the ball now with this Southampton game, because it'd be a criminal if they slipped up there, particularly with the week to come Real Madrid. And I mean, they're in a good position Champions League wise, top of the Champions League, but you don't want to be sort of throwing in any towel against Real Madrid, do you?
No, and even the Southampton game, if you obviously do lose that, it goes without saying, it kind of increases the pressure on the Manchester City game. But I mean, Theo, how important, as Gorsty says, is rotation going to be? Because the first kind of 5 or 6 weeks of the Slot reign, we didn't really see a great deal of it. But over the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've seen how he's horses for courses in most positions, as you say, midfield, chopping and changes, Jones here, Szoboszlai there. How impressive you've been with his kind of rotation policy, and how he's been able to kind of manage everyone.
Well, he's learnt from the Nottingham Forest game, hasn't he? Because wasn't that one where he didn't make as many changes as we were expecting? It all fell apart almost. He knows he's got a very good squad here. It's something he spoke about so often in the summer when people were saying you need to sign more players. And the fact that you can swap between Robertson and Tsimikas, you can swap between McAllister, Szoboszlai, Jones, Diaz and Gakpo when Jota's fit, Nunes and Jota. Now you're going to have Elliott as an option again. If Chiesa comes on, gets back to the levels he can, then he's an option in that attack as well. You're going to need to rotate, but it's not necessarily a massive drop-off there at all, because it is a very good Liverpool squad this season. Like, they've had injuries like Arsenal, like Manchester City, but it's not fazed them. And it is a really tough run coming up. Like, I know we say we're in the middle of this one, but for me, I just look at it international break to international break, and this is the start of the toughest one. Like the last one, it looked hard because you had Leipzig, Chelsea, Arsenal in that mini run there. But this one, when it's Real Madrid, Man City, Newcastle, Everton, you've got Tottenham in there, you've got Manchester United at the end of it in the new year, you've got West Ham and Leicester, which isn't going to be easy in festive fixtures. You're going to Southampton twice. You're going to need every...
No one wants that, do they? No one wants to go to Southampton.
You're going to need every man standing, aren't you? And it is going to be opportunities for Harvey Elliott to come in, show what you can do. Chiesa as well. And you just need to look at Gakpo and Diaz, how they're balancing that role, how they're both coming on. They're both scoring goals. It doesn't matter who's starting there. They're having an impact. And how Robertson can be taken out of the firing line because he's not playing great against Arsenal. And it's not a drop-off. Tsimikas comes and does well, and then you bring Robertson back in against Aston Villa, and he's got that point to prove. And he said, you wrote me off, didn't you? But I'm still here. I'm still fighting. And you've got lots of players in that squad now who can be in a similar sort of position. Like Trent's probably not one you take out too often, but you've got Conor Bradley there. It is a very strong squad, so it is good that they can rotate it. There isn't a drop-off, and it does encourage everyone to reach new levels. They're going to need them because it is going to be a tough season. Expanded Champions League. It looks at the moment they'll be going for everything, which I don't think many of us expected right at the start of the season. When you go into these games now and you could build, an 8, 10, 11-point gap on Man City, that's ridiculous. You've got to be in a position to make it count, and you can't just rely on 11 players for that.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly you can undo months of good work with just a bad couple of days. I remember last season Arsenal got beat by West Ham and then got beat by Fulham, didn't they, in a sort of short time period, and then all of a sudden they're looking up at Man City, I think, and obviously didn't win the league. I remember, was it 10 years ago, Liverpool lost to Man City on Boxing Day, was it? And then a couple of days later Chelsea, and then Liverpool end up don't winning the league, or not winning the league rather. When the fixtures come this thick and fast, all you need is a bad week to undo loads of good work. So it will be important for them to get the team selections right, make sure that everyone is as close to 100% as possible. And I just think this Southampton game coming up is so big, because if they get 3 points, then we know the minimum gap is going to be 5 points when City comes to Anfield. And it just has to be that, doesn't it? Because, we'll see what happens with the City-Tottenham game on Saturday, but if City come to Anfield and it's only a 2-point gap or whatever, or it's only 4, that could give them massive impetus, I think, just to give them an extra few percent to try and get something at Anfield where they haven't really got too much after over the last 20 odd years. So I just think this game coming up next is huge, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it sets the tone, doesn't it, that Southampton game? If you drop points there and all of a sudden you're facing the European champions Real Madrid, you're almost playing catch up in your own head a bit, aren't you? And trying to put your wrongs right there. So
it says a lot about mentality, doesn't it? Because it'd be easy to be distracted, like we saw when Trent limped off, and then it's not as bad as first, third. He should be back for Man City, maybe Real Madrid, and you're like, don't risk him against Southampton. But then, Van Dijk now, if that's medical grounds precaution, you're like, do we just not risk him against Southampton? Alisson Becker, don't risk him. But then that's not the right attitude to have against the side bottom of the table, who are going to be fighting for every single point they can get. They still need to be professional, go out and do the job, because if you slip up against Southampton, that is a chink there on the armour, what it was going to happen next. You've got to keep the run going, and it's unfortunate they've had an international break, but they've managed it well before. They've got to do so again.
I mean, it's a bit of, I know we'll preview it, next week as well, but just on that Real Madrid kind of Man City double header, I mean, it is so weird, isn't it? Because obviously, when the fixture list comes out for the Champions League, everyone kind of circles, that Real Madrid game, and then obviously you see it's followed by Manchester City. But it's not a free hit, of course, but the position Liverpool put themselves in with the previous kind of 3 or 4 Champions League games, it puts them in a really strong position of it's, it's not a must-win kind of thing where maybe people thought it might have been. I don't think anyone really understood the format, how many points it would take to win, but obviously that's become clearer. But I also think psychologically it's huge.
I think Liverpool will want to win it more because of the identity of the opponent, rather than it just being a Champions League game where they're in a really strong position. I just think, like you say, psychologically, I think if Liverpool win that, it maybe will give them more belief that they can go and do something serious in the Champions League. Beating the team who've won it, 14, 15 times now, they couldn't hold us. The team who have, I mean, it's difficult to describe Real Madrid as anyone's bogey team, really, but, they have had some great success against Liverpool, haven't they, in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So, I think that one will be hopefully, I think Anfield will be rocking all week next week, but that one will be. It could be a potentially huge night in the season, actually.
Well, there's a generation of Liverpool fans that don't remember them beating Real Madrid ever, do they? Like the last time was the 4-0 in 2009, and that was a great Anfield European night. But you think so many times you go into it and go, right, this is the chance, and it just doesn't happen. Whether it's
supporters always say, don't they, we owe Real Madrid one, and then
it never happens.
Real Madrid win. There was the group stage in 2014, was it 13-14? Obviously, Kiev, the COVID season when they just played in the training ground and then an empty Anfield. Obviously,
final in Paris.
The year after in the round of 16.
When you're 2-0 up at Anfield as well.
After 15 minutes or whatever it was. I mean, Real Madrid literally tried to give Liverpool it that night, didn't they? And then Alisson said, I'll give you one back kind of thing, and kicked it.
And it's like the Real Madrid camp when they keep biting on Salah's words because it was like, I want to not get revenge, but I owe you one. And they're like, lol, no. And just made him look silly. Yeah. So it's like you can't keep building it up as this is the chance for revenge, but it would be massive for Liverpool psychologically if they could. But then the only issue there is Real Madrid could finish 24th in these group stages and you'd still back them to win the competition. Yeah. They'll go through the playoffs and they'll beat whoever with last minute goals, extra time penalties, whatever in the knockout stages. It's just what they do. But you still want to win when it's in front of you.
And I'm not sure we'll be seeing him in kind of the immediate future, Gorsty, but someone, or a name, should I say, that has kind of had a lot of traction online in recent days, has been kind of more talk about his future, is Federico Chiesa. I mean, just where are we up to kind of with him, if we know, and kind of what's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, I think I asked Slot about Chiesa before the Aston Villa game, and he said he didn't say he was concerned by his lack of momentum and his injuries flaring up, but he did say it was far from ideal. They're trying to get a pre-season into his legs. I think he played for Italy in the Euros, and that was in June, and then he didn't play competitively again until September, I think. So it's a fair old whack without going and playing competitively. I think he trained with the 21s during the September international break. Possibly, if he's back in training, he will have been training with the 21s last week. I think Liverpool are back to work today, so we we'll see him in training this week. I'm not sure. Yeah, just someone who, going off what Slot said in Leipzig, is struggling to handle the intensity of Liverpool, and that's a bit of a concern. Considering he wasn't massively injury prone last season, he played 30 odd games for Juventus. So I guess it's just about getting him close to 100% as possible, and then seeing where and when he can be involved. But the good news is, Liverpool haven't necessarily needed them at the moment. It's not like it's down to the bare bones. Everyone else is fit other than Jota, who we're hoping will be back soon. So, yeah, difficult one for him. I'm starting to get slightly concerned. I know Slot said he wasn't, but I am really. What is it now, 2 or 3 months at the club? Still only seen him in fleeting glimpses, really. Only really seen him in one. He come off the bench against Bournemouth, but other than that West Ham game, which we were there for, it hasn't been too much else for him to go at. So, yeah, we'll see. I think it's an important few weeks for him now, because the games are there, and if he's fit, he'll get some minutes.
It'll be interesting to see where all the sound bites in Italy are coming from, because that is a lot of reports saying he's been offered to Inter Milan or he's been offered to Roma, isn't it? Like, there's a lot of talk in Italy, but they don't necessarily seem to acknowledge that he's been injured for Liverpool. Yeah. And it's about, has that come from an agent, or is it just gossip and it's complete rubbish? It'd be understandable if he was feeling homesick, because it hasn't been an ideal couple of months for him coming to a new country and he's been injured. But it's not as though, from our understanding, Arne Slot's just not fancied him. You've not had a proper pre-season, and it's not like Gravenberch last year at Bayern, where he was coming on for 5-minute substitute appearances here and there. He was completely sidelined from Juventus. He was not with the first team. He was not playing any friendlies. And when you've had that ACL injury a couple of years earlier, your body's a little bit more fragile. It's a little bit more prone to picking up those injuries. He had a great year last year without it, but you still need that rhythm. I'm not as concerned about him in terms of injuries or whatever, because I think you can be patient with him, as Liverpool have learnt this year with Gravenberch, but you still need to get him out there on the pitch. And then it's like, does anything come from these Italian reports, or is it just rubbish? Does he just need to get a few games, get a couple of goals, and then we see how good he can be? This is a player Liverpool have liked for a long, long time. He's been linked with them since 2020, 2021. I think they've been following him since the early days at Fiorentina. But for him to be worth that weight, you need to see a bit more substance there. It'll be interesting to see what happens this week, because Slot did say he was going to be back in training during the international break. And obviously, the club put out pictures of Harvey Elliott training again, and that's a big boost for Liverpool. But we've not seen them do anything with Chiesa yet. Maybe they don't want to put that pressure on, go over and look at him in case he does get another setback or anything. But on Friday, maybe we'll probably get an update, won't we? Someone will probably ask Arne Slot about Chiesa there, and be interested to see what position he is at. Because while you might not throw him in straight away against Southampton, Real Madrid, Man City, you're still going to need him in those games in December where you've got so many teams coming to Anfield. You're going there every 3-4 days, festive period as well. This is a player who's not had a festive period before in football, who will have had a winter break year after year in Italy. So that's another reason you've got to look after that body well. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope he's a player we're talking about in more positive terms in the weeks ahead. But that's all from today. From myself, Keifer MacDonald, Theo Squires and Paul Gorst. Thanks for watching.